Westchester. I walked into the office in like November, and someone said to me, and then the office manager said to me, Rabbi Ciner, can you believe someone called November asking when's the last day of school? And I said, was it a teacher?
Wanting to know.
Yeah. Okay, Shalom Aaron. Baruch Hashem Mitzuyan. Mazal Tov ala bat mitzvah shupam. Haya nifla. Okay. Okay. Tov, are we on?
Yeah.
We're on. Good.
They say it's a good job when you go with joy to job and you go with joy from job.
When I used to come visit my father, my parents, Aleim Shalom, with our 7 children, so it was a lot. So my father would say, Baruch atah b'voecha, blessed are you when you come. Baruch atah b'tzeitecha, blessed are you when you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
When my son comes for more than 3 days.
Okay, good. So page 726. 726. Sefer Bamidbar, the book of Bamidbar, and the Parsha of Bamidbar. What does Bamidbar mean? In the wilderness.
In the wilderness.
Okay? So it's interesting. We have different names for the books of the Torah. Okay? And Rabbi David Foreman does a very interesting analysis. Let's work this through ourselves a little bit. The first book of the Torah, what is the name of that in Hebrew? Breishit. Right? In English, what do we call it? Genesis. Is that a good name?
No.
Or not a good
What
name?
does it mean, Breishit?
Breishit means in the beginning.
Yes and no.
Okay? Why is it good? Why is it not good?
Is the Hebrew version good, are you asking, or the English version?
Either one. Well, there it's pretty simple. What is Genesis?
What does it mean?
Yeah. Origin. Yeah. Yeah. So basically the Hebrew and the English are pretty well aligned. Right? And the sages also called it Sefer Breishit. Right? So is that a good name for the entire book?
I think.
Or not? Amy?
I think it's mostly not good, but it sort of puts everybody on notice. Here's in the beginning.
Okay.
But it's
So
it's not for me not deep enough. Doesn't.
Okay. Now realize we have one word to work with. Okay. Right? But so right. Well, why would we say it's not a good name for the entire book?
What does it, besides
beyond
the beginning,
Why does it need to be for the entire book? Maybe it is for the essence.
Okay, so does that word describe the essence that that's the name not just of the parasha, not just of the first portion, but that becomes the name of the entire sefer. So is that a good name for the entire sefer or entire book or not?
Shouldn't you have a start and an end? Like you start out and then go or something, and here it's just in the beginning.
Okay, so
the beginning of the book.
well, okay.
Because it's not only beginning.
Okay,
It's to some
right?
extent
So if the
end,
beginning
and
means just the beginning of the world, meaning if it's about creation, then it's not a very good name. Because we have about 22, 23 verses speaking about creation, and then we're often running with Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel and Noah and Avraham and Yitzchak and Yishmael and Yaakov and Esav and Yosef and the brothers. Right? So we have 20-something verses of creation, and then we're often running with so much more. However, the Ramban actually, he expands the word Breishit, beginning. Beginning of what? If we were to say Breishit is the name, which is of the entire book, so this is the beginning of... Okay, it's the beginning of the physical world, creation. It's the beginning of the sojourns of mankind. It's the beginnings of this nation of Israel. Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the brothers, the Shvatim, the tribes, right? It's the beginning of everything. So really, Breishit, I think, is an excellent name. Right? When we don't just limit it to the beginning of the creation of the world, those 6 days that we speak about, but if it's talking about all the beginnings, then this truly is the beginnings over here. Creation, mankind. Rabbi Sachs has some beautiful essays about how the beginning stories of the Torah are laying down the foundational principles of mankind getting along and working with one another. You have Adam and Eve with him saying, the woman that you gave to me, right? She's the one who gave me to eat, right? There's denying personal responsibility. And we see the effects of denying personal responsibility. And then you have Cain and Hevel, right? Am I the guardian of my brother? So Isaac says, there I'm denying any moral responsibility. Who are you? Who is society to tell me what's right and wrong? Right? So you have Adam denying personal responsibility. You have Cain denying moral responsibility. You have the generation of Noach, where as a community they are denying any sense of responsibility to one another. And you have the Tower of Babel, right, where they're denying any responsibility to God, right? So we have all these beginnings of the foundations of society, and then we come on to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we have the beginning of the nation. So Breishit actually, I think, really is a fantastic name, right? Hebrew Breishit, English Genesis, right? Inception, beginning of. It works nicely. Book number 2. In Hebrew, what's that called? In English, what's it called?
Exodus.
In English, it's Exodus. In Hebrew, what's it called? Shemot. What does Shemot mean? Names. Let's look at the English name. How's that? Is that a good name for that entire book?
What is it about?
Exodus is about the enslavement in Egypt, the plagues, the exodus from Egypt, the splitting of the sea, the receiving the Torah, the building the Mishkan, building the tabernacle. So we have to pick one word to describe that book, to describe the essence, the crux of that book. How's Exodus? How's that going to rate? Scale of 1 to 10. Where are we putting it? Don't be bashful.
I like it.
8.
8. Aaron, you're shaking your head. You don't like it. Huh? Why is that?
Because it doesn't really describe the Exodus.
What do you mean? The Exodus, it does describe, right? We have the 10 plagues. We have a lot devoted to that, and then the actual leaving, the splitting of the sea, right? Right? I think Exodus is pretty good, right? And if we'll add on another layer, because you might argue and say, well, the Exodus, right? Is that the main event? Or you might argue and say, what is the main historical, climactic event?
Sinai Revelation.
Sinai Revelation, right? So you might want to call that, maybe if you had to choose one event from the second book, maybe it should be Torah, Sinai,
There wouldn't have been
Revelation.
Torah without Exodus.
Okay, good. You wouldn't have the Torah we wouldn't have received the Torah without the Exodus. Meaning, I think we could look at it, what we've mentioned before. Pesach, the holiday of Pesach, has 7 days in Israel, according to the Torah. The first day and the 7th day. And we have Chol HaMoed, intermediary days in between. What event took place on the first day? Exodus. Exodus from Egypt. Right? Along with the Passover lamb, etc. What event took place on the 7th day?
Revelation.
The 7th day, the splitting of the sea. So we see that even though we might have physically left on the first day, we were still somewhat still there as long as the Egyptians can come after us. And they did come after us. And as long as they could bring us back, and they tried to bring us back, we weren't actually out, fully out, until the splitting of the sea and the demise of the Egyptian army. At that point, we were fully out. So that's our 7 days process of leaving.
So that's the reason for 7 days of Passover?
That's the reason. Those are the events of day 1 and day 7 and the intermediary days.
But
Yes.
that's the reason why we celebrate Passover.
The reason we celebrate Passover 7 days because the Torah tells us to celebrate Passover 7 days. That's why I'm shying away from that. But the events upon which Passover is based is day 1, Exodus, day 7, splitting of the sea, crossing the sea. Now, that is our physical exodus from Egypt. However, another way of looking at it is that the 7 days of Passover, of Pesach, are our first holiday, the first days of the holiday. Shavuot coming up this Sunday and Monday. We're having all night learning here, Saturday night. The topic is the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, which goes through the 48 ways of wisdom. 48 ways to acquire wisdom. And we've broken it down to 48 slots, and different people from the community, from the congregation, are preparing different slots. Right? There's a slot on physical pleasures. How does that contribute? There's a slot on intimacy. Actually, Natalie is taking those two. So different in the community. So we're starting about 11 o'clock, and we're going straight through till 5. But you don't have to. It's not all or nothing. So please do come and join us for some of the learning.
Are these the Sephirot?
No, these are not the Sephirot. This is the mission of it, the 48 ways that the Torah is nicknick by him.
We have
Right?
49 days now because Akiva's students.
That's another factor. Right now we're counting the days from Pesach to Shavuot. Okay? Now we have an element of Avelut, of mourning, because of the students of Rabbi Akiva.
Can you repeat once again why 48 days, 49?
No, we're counting 49 days from the day we left Egypt till we stood by Mount Sinai and heard God speak.
Why so many?
Okay?
Because of the student.
Yes.
Okay.
So these days, Sfirat Omer, the counting the Omer, these are also considered to be intermediary days. So we can look at it as we have the first day of Pesach, intermediary days, last day of Pesach, or we can look at it, we have Pesach, 7 days, intermediary days, and then Shavuot. Because just like we had 2 stages of the physical exodus, actually leaving, and then no longer having the fear of the Egyptians coming after us, we also have our physical leaving and now our spiritual leaving. So we expand Exodus, hi Bailey. If we expand Exodus to mean our leaving, right? Our leaving from this state to another state. So then Exodus would include both leaving physically from Egypt and also becoming what's called a Mamlechet Kohanim, right? A kingdom of priests. Okay? So, Exodus, I think, is a pretty good name for the second book of the Torah. Shmot. Shmot, which means names. That doesn't sound like a very, very good name for the entire book. Why is it called Shmot names? Because we begin, And these are the names of the children of Israel who came down to Egypt. We list those names. But then we're off and running with the enslavement, right? Paro's saying, right, these people, they're becoming too numerous, they're going to fight against us, let us be wise, let us shut them down, throw all the boys into the river, that they can't grow, they can't expand, and then we have all the plagues and all that follows. How is Shemot, the Hebrew name, how is that a good name for this entire book?
In the end, people are the most important.
I'm sorry?
In the end, people are the most important. And
Interesting.
these are the names of every Jew counts. That's why we don't.
Okay, so we'll come to the book of Numbers, which is the book of counting, pretty soon. Okay? So, names. Yes, Cheryl.
I'm just puzzled about then why is the English name not names? Why is it called?
Yeah, so the English names, they chose a different
Is
name.
that what I wanted to ask?
Yeah.
But it's not a translation then.
It's not a translation, but I think it's a good name.
I think it's a great name.
Okay, so
What
we
would
agree.
it be in Hebrew?
Huh?
What would
Exodus,
be in Hebrew?
Yitziah, perhaps, yeah.
Why didn't they call it that?
So that's the question. So why is it called Shemot? What do names have to do? Right? What is the essence of names that this second book, Bailey, we're going through the names of the 5 books of the Torah and trying to understand how those names actually represent what the essence of each of those books are. So we
tribes?
I'm sorry?
We count tribes?
We're not counting in that book. It's Shemot, it's names.
Oh, names.
Names. Aaron.
Who decided the names in English?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Yeah, it's very.
That's a good question.
Rabbis who translated it.
Huh?
Rabbis who translated
Yeah. You know, maybe it's from the Latin. I'm not sure.
The Sanhedrin?
Not that I know of. Right? There are certain books which have, we'll soon see, which have, the sages gave it a different name. Right? Right? But I'm not sure where the English comes from. Right? I'm not sure where the English comes from. You know, well, look, if we want to defend it, the Ramban, Nachmanides, he calls this book the book of exile and redemption. That's what he calls it. In which case, Exodus is pretty good. Because Exodus is the bridge between the exile and the redemption. The Exodus is the connecting point between those two. So the English is pretty good. We have to work on the Hebrew. Yes, Cheryl?
So how many people are we talking about in the beginning? Was it 79 or 40?
70.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe...
We don't even list all 70 names.
But everything in our nation derives from that.
Okay. So you want to say that this is the book of nation building, right? And therefore, it comes from those names of those who went down. So that's how you want to defend names. Nice. I hear that. I can hear that. Yes, Ora.
I don't know how to connect this, but wasn't man created, man's role was to name the animals?
Okay, that's interesting. Yes, Adam was given the assignment of calling names to the animals. Okay, good. I think we might incorporate that. Eileen, what did you want to say?
I think it sort of builds a bridge between what came before and what happened.
Good. What do you
next.
mean? What do you mean?
The patriarchal family, and then all of a sudden there's a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. How do you get from here to there?
Okay, good, nice. So, yes, Dov.
Also, there's a few key names in there that are very important.
Okay, I hear that. The Torah uses the word shame in a different context also. There's a concept of yibum. Okay? Yibum is that if a married man dies and they had no children, so then his wife, the wife of this late husband, will normally marry his brother. And we say that is in order to lahakim la'achiv shem, to establish a name for the brother. Now, he's not named after the brother necessarily. So when we say that we're going to establish a name, what do we mean?
Ancestry.
An ancestry, right? A
Continuation.
continuation, right? People will donate money and they want to have their name on the building. Why do they want their name on the building?
So that in the world to come,
Right.
someone will.
But the world to come, God knows exactly who gave what without the name on the building.
Right.
Besides pride,
A legacy?
a legacy. A legacy.
So
That after they leave this world, there's meant to be a legacy. Oh, so now, if Shmot means legacy, now we really have the crux of this book. We come down to Egypt. But all of a sudden, Paro wants to do what? Wants to snuff out this legacy. To make us not matter, make us not count, make us just dissipate. And then we have the Exodus. Wow. Right? We have Mount Sinai. Right? We build the Mishkan. Right? So now as a nation, we are establishing a very powerful legacy. Okay, do we hear that? So if shame, name, does not just mean name as, hi, my name is, but lahakim, la'achiv, shame, as the Torah uses it, to establish a legacy. That was perfect, Kathy, thank you. To establish a legacy. So now this book is all about the struggle for that legacy. Will we be establishing a legacy as a nation or not? So all of a sudden, both the Hebrew and the English of books 1 and 2 work, I think, pretty well. Book number 3 in Hebrew, Vayikra. Right? Let's take a quick look at that on page 544. Vayikra, right? 544, in English 545. Vayikra, which means, and he called.
And what is Leviticus? What does it mean?
In English, Leviticus, which is taken from what the sages call this, Torah Kohanim. Torah, the instructions of the priests, the Kohanim. Right? Because this book of Vayikra, of Leviticus, right? So let's analyze.
What does it mean, Leviticus?
The tribe of Levi.
Okay.
The Levite tribe. So let's analyze this. Let's go first with the English, which again is what the sages called it. Torah Kohanim, the instructions of the Kohanim. How is that? 1 to 10, how do we rate that? Up there. 8, 9. It's a tough crowd here. Okay, no one's getting away with a 10. Fair enough. Right? But this book really goes through the sacrifices. It goes through everything. Right? It goes through the holiness of the camp. It goes through the holiness of the place. Right? Which is all that took place in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, in the temple. It goes through the holiness of the individual, the different groups that we have. It goes through the holiness of time, speaking about Shabbat, the Sabbath, and the holidays. Right? Leviticus, pretty good. Amy?
I actually think this is a 10 because if you think about okay, you nation.
You're a generous spirit.
You nation, in the beginning, you nation, now you want to create a legacy, and this is, God is calling on us, telling us exactly how to do it.
Okay.
So I just need
Okay, so you want to say that not only is Leviticus a good name, but you want to defend Vayikra. And he called. I hear that. Say it again, Amy. Why Vayikra? Because it's not just and he called, but it's
He called. God called upon
good.
us.
It's a calling.
Yes.
Yeah, it is a calling.
It's a okay. Though you can take that calling, right? It is a calling, right? So that is very, very nice, right? That after we've had this struggle for legacy that took place in Shemot, in Exodus, but it was really a struggle all about would we have this legacy or not? So now, along with this legacy, right, when someone is called, right, you're in a crowd, and your name is called, right, what does that imply? With me, it meant I was in trouble, right? but what does that mean? What does that imply?
Being singled out.
Singled out, attention, importance, right? So, on a grander scale, after this struggle for legacy, now what do we have? Vayikra. We are being called. Good. However, it actually begins Vayikra El Moshe. Oh. Who's called? Moshe. Moses is called. And everyone else is where? At the bottom of the mountain. Right? Moshe climbs Har Sinai, Mount Sinai. And everyone else, we're down towards the bottom. So, in this struggle for legacy, Vayikra Leviticus, the tribe of Levite, shows us Moshe making a difference, Moshe being called, Moshe having his calling, along with the tribe of Moshe, of Moses, the Levites. But how about you and I? Right? Where does everyone else fit in? So we have again the start of creation, the start of mankind and society, and the start of the children of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the tribes. But then where are we going to go with that? That's book number 2. That is that struggle, forces from outside trying to squelch who we are, what we're about to do, the role that we're going to play, and our struggle for that shame, for that legacy. And in Vayikra we see that, we have, or at least he has, that permanence. He, Vayikra El Moshe. Moshe is being called. Moshe is being summoned. Moshe steps forward. The next book, where we are about to start today. Page 726, 727. The 4th book of the Torah is, in Hebrew, Bamidbar. In English, Numbers. And once again, the English were very good in this case, because the sages call this Chumash HaPikudim. And we'll deal with that word in just a moment. Okay? Let's first deal with the Hebrew. Bamidbar. What does Bamidbar mean? And God spoke to Moses in the wilderness.
In the desert.
In the desert. Yeah. Okay? Or when we think of wilderness, we think of the Amazon rainforest. And there was not an Amazon rainforest, it was a desert. But a wilderness meaning an uninhabited, right? An uninhabited area. How's that name? How are we rating that name? So what does this book speak about? Well, our travels in the desert, right? The sending the spies, not going all that well, and therefore remaining in the desert for the 40 years, right? All of that happened over there with Korach and the rebellion, and Balak and Bilam trying to curse the children of Israel, and Pinchas, right? And then we have all of our travels, Matot, right? We have the Mas'eh, right? Bamidbar, how are we rating that? Good name, not a good name?
Very good name.
I think a very good name. Good. Al is also a generous spirit.
No.
You are. Don't deny it. You are a generous spirit.
I think it's a good name. Essence of the book.
Yeah, I'm with you. Bamidbar, I think, is really good. Right? This is the stories, the multiple stories that took place, the events, the nation shaping events that took place in that midbar. In that midbar. Right? We were discussing in the class last night, right, Bailey, in our conversion class, we were discussing the idea of the 3 pilgrimage holidays, and Sukkot is all about the time that we spent in the midbar, in the desert. And the sukkah, the booth that we build, represents beneath the sheltering wings of God's providence. Right? So Bamidbar is a great name. Numbers. The English and our sages call it, well, our sages call it Chumash HaPekudim. Right? The Chumash of, well, let's see. Let's find that verse, 1 second. Oh, here we go. How about that? Verse 3. Mi ben esrim shana, from Vamala, from 20 years and older, kol yotzei tzava, the Yisroel, all those who go out to the army of Israel, tifkedu otam. What's tifkedu otam? You shall count them. Right? So Chumash HaPekudim can become the book of counting. Right? Okay. How's that? How's that? How are we rating that? The book of counting.
So why don't we call the book counting? We call it numbers.
Okay. So numbers, I think, is a loose translation of Pekudim, of counting, right? But we'll soon see, because in Hebrew, Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language of Hebrew, there are so many different layers that go into a word. So let's...
Is the process, numbers is what they came up with after the counting.
I'm sorry?
Counting is a process.
Mm-hmm.
Numbers is the result of the...
Okay, fair enough. That is a good analysis. I like that. That is correct. Okay. So, now, we start off with countings, right? We're counting the entire nation over here. Each tribe, the numbers. And then they had a certain formation as they traveled through the desert with 3 tribes in this diamond formation, right? So we also tally each of those digalim, each of those encampments, we'll call it. Where else do we find the word, the shoresh, pei kuf dal? Yes, Aaron.
Why would they only count those who are 20 years or older? Soldiers.
Yeah, so it would seem that from that point, right, we have bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah at 13 and 12, but there's also a concept of being bar onshin. Bar onshin means fully responsible, fully culpable for one's actions, right? So right? And that's at age 20 that a person is considered to be fully culpable. This nod towards the teenage years, and actually, physiologically, they find that the full mature decision making part of the brain only fully matures when a person is in their in their early 20s. Yeah, right. One of my sons who was a fearless child. I mean, the first time he saw a pool, he just jumped right in, right? And then, you think he'd come out like, right? He came up with the biggest smile on his face, like, hey, this is great, right? His Gan teacher, right? Gan is the preschool. She stopped taking the kids to the park because of my son, right? She was literally having nightmares, she said, because my son would climb not just the climbing structures, but he would climb it from the outside and perch himself, like the little house. Not inside the little house at the top of the ladder, but on top of the house. She was literally having nightmares because of my son, and she stopped taking the kids to the park. And he would jump off bridges. I mean, he would that. And then it was fat. And he had a motorcycle. He had a four-wheel drive. He had all the. He was fearless.
Adrenaline junkie.
I'm sorry.
An adrenaline junkie.
Yeah. He had a post in his room. If you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. Yeah, that was and then in his mid-20s, he said to Natalie and I, he said, I was riding my motorcycle, and I looked down at the road, at just how fast it was going by, and for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of, I don't know, fear, but maybe this isn't such a good idea. Right? And he speaks about how that set in, right, in his mid-20s. Right? If he's at a bridge, it's like, maybe I should jump. Maybe I shouldn't jump. Maybe I should know what's down in the water and how deep it is, or what rocks might be there, or alligators. Right? Maybe I should find that out before I jump.
So he doesn't
Right?
bungee jumping.
I'm sorry?
He doesn't bungee jumping.
Yeah. Right? So, at age 20, there's a certain responsibility that kicks in. But where else do we find the word pukudim, which means counting? Where else do we find pakad?
When they do the census.
Well, that's the same thing. That's the counting again. That's where we are now. But in a different context. In a different context. Dov?
Is it Yitzchak?
What by Yitzchak?
Fear of Yitzchak?
So, no, that's pachad, not pakad. Vayifkod Hashem et Sarah. Sarah was barren. And then what happened? Vayifkod Hashem et Sarah.
Hashem remembered.
There it means Hashem remembered. So pakad can mean counting. Pakad also means remember. God remembered. Ora?
I don't think so. I think visited.
If you remembered, you're accounted for. So there's
One second.
He came to visit.
He didn't come to visit, though. It doesn't say Hashem pakad et Sarah, vayomer la, and he said to her, right? Right? There was no visit of God and Avram and Sarah. Right? So there it means God remembered Sarah, and what happened? And she...
God remember all the time.
Okay, good. She said God doesn't forget. So what do you mean God remembered? Okay, good.
He decided
Right?
to do something about it.
Exactly. So Ramban says very beautifully, right? With any, I've done this before with you guys. With any anthropomorphism, anthropomorphism is attributing a trait,
human trait.
a human trait to something that is not human. Anthropomorphism is attributing a human trait to God in order for us to understand God, even though it doesn't really apply to God. And God heard, and God saw, right? Well, God saw means God had this awareness, right? God's outstretched arm. Well, our outstretched arm represents our strength. God's outstretched arm is a way of describing God's strength. God remembered, right? So, as I've done before a number of times, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I have to go do something. I'm kidding. But what just happened? What just happened is, I remembered. You fall for it every time, guys. Come on. It's like gullible's the only word that's not in the dictionary. Really? Right? So, when I remembered what happened, I stopped doing what I was doing. Right? I was in the middle of teaching, discussing, and I stopped in order to go do something else. So when we remember, we switch gears. So when we say God remembered, it's not that God forgets and that He remembered, but God switched gears. We find Vayizkor, God remembered Noah. That's Noah during the flood. That as opposed to the increase of waters, it's now going to be a decrease of waters. And God remembered the children of Israel in Egypt. Until now there's been this attribute of judgment, of din, which led to slavery. And now there's going to be the attribute of mercy, rachamim, which is going to lead, so it means a change. Until now Sarah had been barren, and now she is going to become pregnant. So Vayifkod means God remembered. So Janet, what were you saying before though? You made a very nice point.
If you enumerate or count someone,
okay.
And once they're accounted for, they remember.
Good. Okay, so we can understand that there is a connection between counting and remembering. Now, we also find another term, another context that very same shoresh, that same root word of pakad, pei, kuf, dalid, is used. And that's vayifkod, vayifkedu et b'nei Levi. Right? And that means to appoint. Okay? And that also is, there's an overlay there. If I count, if I remember someone, then what's vayifkedu? You're being appointed. You're being charged with a mission. Right? So we look at it that way now. Chumash Pekudim, we had Vayikra. Right? So we had the beginning. And then we had the struggle for a legacy. And then we had Vayikra El Moshe. God called, summoned Moshe. Great. But how about all of us? How about the rest of everyone? So now we have Chumash Pekudim, the book of Numbers, or as we've seen, the book of counting, the book of remembering, the book of appointing. And this entire book is about what role will all of the individuals play. Right? Look at all the different events that we have over here, and then we'll zoom back into the very, very, very first beginning here. We have Korach. Right? What's Korach's? What's Korach's sense? Korach is a rebellion. What's he rebelling?
Hashem.
Hashem, but he clothes it in. Why are you the head honcho? Right? I can't think of anyone more eligible to be the head honcho than, surprisingly, myself. Who would have thought? I think I should be number one. Right? Right? No one walks around saying, I'm number 2, I'm number 4,774, I'm number 1. Right? Why do we love sports? Why do we love sports? Because even though I might not be such a good basketball player, football player, hockey player, tennis player, we did it. We did it. We took them down. We swept. Right? We hit it. We won. Right? It gives us a chance to identify with being number 1. Right? I'm sitting there on my couch, terribly overweight, right? Unable to possibly do any of these shots that they're hitting. We're number 1. We took them down. We did it. Right? So Pekudim is this battle. Right? This battle of, I always say, what every human being, I think, at their core, most wants is to matter. That I make a difference. I make a difference in people's lives. I make a difference in this world. That is Chumash Pekudim. Not just Vayikra El Moshe, not just that Moshe clearly matters